Hey there, in this video I'm going to help you to decide which lens is the better option for you. First of all, both of these lenses have their own strengths and weaknesses, so depending on your use case, one of them for sure will fit your needs better than the other one. For example, you could be planning to film a lot more, or perhaps take more pictures. Before my final conclusions, I'm going to show you the sun stars they can create. I'll compare the stabilization they have side by side on an X-T3, which doesn't have inbuilt stabilization, and I will compare their autofocus while shooting videos as well. So grab a joint or a coffee, I am not judging, and please enjoy the video. Okay, let's unpack what we have here. First, if you have never seen them before, here's what they look like side by side on the Fujifilm X-T4. We could all agree they both look very pretty and balance really well on the X-T4. As you can see, the price you pay for a longer focal length is a quite significant size and weight difference, not to mention the actual price difference. Now let's look at them a little bit closer. What do we have here? One of them has a marked clicking aperture ring with a full stop. The other one is also clicking but no markings or full stops. While we're talking about the aperture, the 18-55 one can open up to f2.8 at its widest focal length at 18mm, and it's f4 at 55mm. I'll show you what it looks like in the real world later in the video. The 16-80 has a constant f4 to f22 aperture. Let me tell you why it's important to have a constant aperture. Let's say you're outside and you manually set the perfect exposure. It's a combination of your ISO, aperture and shutter speed. And on top of this, you should really get into a habit of locking your white balance too. Now this is important because if everything is set manually, there will be no changes introduced by the camera mid-recording. And this way your footage will look a lot better. So let's say you're shooting at 18mm f2.8 to get the highest subject separation. You get the shot, and now to change perspective, you want to use the 55mm focal length for an extreme close-up shot. This ability to zoom is one of the advantages of zoom lenses versus primes, but that's a topic of another video. So if you want to zoom in with this variable aperture lens, that means the aperture will change in the process. All of a sudden you'll have less light coming into the sensor, so you'll have to change your exposure settings too. On the other hand, you don't have to worry about this with the 16-80mm lens, because its aperture doesn't change while you're zooming in and out. Of course, this would be relevant if the 16-80 had the f2.8 constant aperture, not f4, because everything above f4 on the 18-55 will stay constant. So to summarize this aperture situation, the 18-55 having a wider f2.8 option beats the 16-80's fixed f4 aperture, because if you're planning to shoot in low light, you'll have a full extra step of light difference, and f2.8 is also better at freezing moving subject while shooting still, because you can crank up that shutter speed a lot more. Now in terms of creating maximum subject separation, blurry background.
So we're on the 18-55 at 18mm f2.8. Is this doable?
It's not as straightforward as the lower f-stop, the blurrier the image, because the focal length also plays an important role here. For example, 80mm at f4 will create a lot more subject separation than the 18mm at f2.8.
Is there a bokeh f4 80mm? Is this more than the f2.8?
Let's see what else do we have here. Two switches on the 18-55. This one lets the camera to set its own aperture. You simply set the ring to A on the 16-80 to do the exact same thing. And we have the OIS switch, which I really appreciate. This is more important for videographers. If you switch it off, both the IBIS and the OIS will be immediately disabled.
Yeah, and if I turn the OIS off, then that turns the IBIS off as well at the same time. And then, let's see, we're still at f2.8, 18mm. Is this doable for vlogging?
Now this can be very helpful when you want to simulate an intense action-packed scene. OIS is always on when you use the 16-80 lens, unless it's on a tripod. Apparently it senses when it's stationary and it switches off by itself. Nice. Otherwise, to switch it off, you'll have to go into the menu. The focus ring has the exact same resistance on my copies. These are not manually focusing when you turn them. Instead, they send a signal to the camera, which will use its electrical focusing system. My 16-80 zoom ring is a bit looser than the 18-55s, but I've never experienced any lens creeping. No issues there. We have a 58 versus a 72 filter size. This is pretty standard. These are not super fast lenses, so you won't really need a variable ND filter to permanently sit on these lenses. But a polarized filter can be a useful addition as an extra layer of protection and creative choice. Finally, there's no USB connection to do the firmware updates. It's all done through the camera itself.
Okay, so we're on the 18-55 at 18mm f2.8. Is this doable for vlogging? I'm only holding the hand like an arm length away. This is the full stretch when I'm stretching around. And then that's just holding it comfortably. And we have the OIS turned on. And f2.8, 18mm. And then this is when I just walk normally. I don't really pay attention to careful walking. I'll show you a careful walking. So now I'm kind of being careful, like the ninja walk, you know. That's a lot, should be a lot smoother. So let's do the same vlogging test on the 16-80mm lens. We're at 16mm, it's a little bit wider than the 18 one, so it should be a little bit nicer. We have the OIS and the IBIS turned on. There's no way for me to turn it off on the lens itself. So on the 18-55, one switch, as I told you before, and the OS is off. That's super handy. Now I can't really do this, so I'm just walking about, especially not mid-recording. So how's it doing? Full arm. This is an arm length away when I stretch my arm. So that's me walking. How's the audio coming through? I hope it's okay. And then this is f4 compared to f2.8 on the. Is the background a little bit less blurry than the 18? Of course it should be, because it's a full stop darker f4 aperture. It's a little bit more closed down, but still decent. We have the sun is going down at the background. So we're checking the sun stars. I'm zooming in a little bit. We're at f10, f11, f14, f16, f18, f20, and f22. So how's the sun star at f22? Let's zoom in to 80mm. Oh yeah, it's way too bright, isn't it? And then close up that. Oh, I like that circle. Did you see that circle? So we're f22 on the 16 to 80mm lens. How's the sun star? Wow, is that magic? So we're on the 18 to 55, f7, f8, f10, f13, 14, 16, f18, f20, and f22. So it's the same, it goes up to f22, just like the 16 to 80 lens. But the sun stars look a little bit different, doesn't it?
In conclusion, who's the 18 to 55 for? This is one of those legendary all-arounder lenses that is a must-have, especially when you're primarily shooting videos. The autofocus works excellent, and you can even zoom record with this lens, and that is an unusual feature in this price range. This is small, lightweight, and you can pick up a second-hand copy dirt cheap. Definitely go for it. What is the best use case for the 16 to 80mm lens? I would say it's the better lens for photographers, especially if you're into landscape photography, where you'll never really need to open up your aperture more than f4 anyway. It's extremely sharp, the image quality is superb, and 16 to 80 covers a pretty substantial focal range if needed. It has weather sealing and a great optical image stabilization for handheld shooting. If you're more into videography, then choose the 18 to 55. If you like to take more photos, then 16 to 80 is your lens. Thanks again. See you in the next one. Bye. If you enjoyed it, then hit that like button, please.